Sean and I both believe in building up front, and whether it's the O-line and the D-line, that's probably where we could always look to improve, and we've tried. And listen, I've got to do a better job there as well of making sure that I give us the weapons that we need.
What's good, folks? Welcome to another edition of the Cover One Film Room, the show that gives you the hows and the whys behind both the good and the bad of the Buffalo Bills. I am one of your two hosts, Anthony Prohaska, joined as always by Eric Turner. And Eric, not necessarily, the behind the scenes of the good and the bad for the Bills in this one, but kind of some of that could lead to some guys becoming some Buffalo Bills. We got some combine talk. The NFL Combine happened last week, a really fun time of year. And again, kind of another beacon or pin in the moment of the offseason, continuing to move us forward, trudge us forward a little bit. We've got guys at several positions of need for the Bills. We wanted to show some of their tape, talk about some of their traits, how the combine kind of put a bow on them or put some things into perspective for them. And that's what we're going to be doing in this episode tonight. But before we do that, how you doing? How you feeling? How's it going?
Good, man. Excited. It's the offseason now, and where I personally am a little behind when it comes to evaluation because, again, like the Bills, they play late into the season, so we're a little behind,
going to the AFC Championship. I'm so behind right now, and then free agency, I just feel like I'm chasing my tail so much here with prospects.
Right. I mean, the last two episodes we worked on free agents at positions that the Bills need, and so of course that takes a lot of research, a lot of evaluation, a lot of film work, and so now. Over the last week or so, or last few weeks, we've been digging in a little more into the draft class and specifically guys that participate in the combine. That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So if you are interested in free agents, free agent targets, all those type of things, we did 2 episodes on the channel. Go ahead and check that out. But tonight we're going to focus on the combine and mainly the guys that worked out and who we think are, Bills targets for whatever reason, whether it's schematic, whether it's the measurables, which is a big one. I know people don't really believe in that, but the Bills have archetypes and, they have tweaked some of them over the years, but we'll get to some of that tonight. But the combine's fun because, you get all this data on these players that you've been watching over the last couple of years. And it's a tool that scouts and personnel can use. It's another event along with like the Senior Bowl and the other all-star events that that's on the calendar that they can use as a tool and data to add to their, their biography or, profile for these players. And so while a lot of it is testing, a lot of it is based on the film and what they've done in their careers at school, the important stuff actually happens behind the scenes when it comes to the interviews, when it comes to the medicals, and those things, obviously, when it comes to the Bills, they hold high regard, and especially in the interviews, obviously they hold that in high regard, but it's just really good context over the 4 days or 5 days of interviews, testing, and all that going on in Indianapolis. It's very good data for the team and very good context for guys like us that like to watch film.
The only thing I wish we got, and we get film on so much stuff, right? NFL, college. I wish we got combine interview film.
Oh my goodness.
I wish I could
that would be so cool,
bro. If we could see how the interviews go, or that guy didn't answer this question well, or oh man, this guy's really smart, or talked about this, because that's such a huge part that we really don't get to see, except for when teams draft certain guys and then they release that footage and their post-draft, promos and all that kind of stuff to prep those dudes up. And sometimes it's really great. Sometimes, I don't know, it doesn't lead to some great things. Kyrie Elam had an amazing one, and it was like, oh man, let's see. And then that hasn't really worked out. Keon Coleman had a really great one last year with the Bills. But that's such a huge, important piece, the interview aspect, and being able to really connect what you see on film and for the teams. Again, this is why we wish we could have that piece, because this is where you really get to dot the I's and cross the T's and see what a player really is. Because like we say on the show all the time, the mental is really what separates these guys when they get to the next level. At a certain point, everyone's big and everyone's strong and everyone's fast and they're all good at football, but it's that mental side of it that really makes you go from, okay to good, and from good to
Yeah.
great, and from great to a Hall of Famer. And that's a huge piece, aside from, again, the on-field measurables and the tools and the evaluation. It's nice to see everything. I know you and I have talked about this before, but I really like the combine from the perspective of, watching someone on tape and thinking like, okay, like I think this dude moves really well. And I'd like this, not that, the measurements and the times are the end all be all, but I'd like to know, like, okay, does he move as well as I think he does? And then you see his 10-yard split, or you see what they do in the shuttle or the 40, and you're like, there it is. Or you see a guy and you're like,
Right.
you know what? I'm a little worried about his change of direction ability. And then he has a poor 3-cone, or he might have a great 3-cone. And you're like,
Yes.
okay, do I need to go back and look at him? Like, is he a better mover than I thought? I like seeing the combine for that piece of putting the evaluation together, or showing us something that maybe we overlooked, and that causes us to go back to the tape and kind of maybe potentially reconfirm.
And that's what's fun about some of the guys we're going to cover tonight. There was some confirmation, there was some validation. There were some of those moments where like, wow, I didn't
Yeah.
expect him to run that fast, because I didn't really see it on film, but maybe there weren't those, measurement type plays where you got to see him open it up because of scheme or situation stuff. So that's what's fun about some of the guys we're going to be covering tonight. But a lot of times that is the fun part, going back and you're like, okay, now I'm watching it through a different lens with a different perspective. This guy was way more athletic during the combine testing than what I saw on film. Let me dig a little deeper. Let me look for those situations where I can use it as a measurement with the film, not with the data that you got at the combine.
Yeah, and it's really nice. You know, I were talking offline before we started, the whoever it is through NFL, what is it, through NFL? Yeah, NFL.com, doing the
Yep.
combine IQ thing now. And so you can filter everything, something that should have been available for years. You can filter for everything, the arm length, wingspan, athleticism. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
The athleticism, 40 times, 3-cone. Anybody who ran anything or who was measured in anything is showing up here. You can filter it by different years. You can filter it by position group. And for us, this is a tremendously helpful tool, because as we talk about every single offseason, we have guys that we like. And then we also have guys that we pay more attention to because they fit a specific archetype that the Bills look for. And so being able to kind of see some of this and be like, oh, like, I like so-and-so. What's his arm length? And then seeing it's too short. And I'm like, okay, never mind. Or the opposite, and being like, oh, this guy does have good arm length like I thought. Or, maybe let me look into the guys based on their arm length, based on wingspan, or based on specific criteria that we know based on position the Bills look for. This is another tool that we use to kind of help narrow down and filter down who we're looking at and why.
Yeah, it does make it a little easier. I think they're still working out some of the kinks on the website, and that's NFL.com/combine/IQ/. And you can sort it by position groups. You can sort it by draft class, has the historical data. And, like what we're going to be talking about tonight, a lot of these tailor-made Bills fits, they fall in line with a lot of the Bills archetypes just based on our research. And something I have done for many years is find the archetypes, find the averages, that general ballpark of where a player or a position, fits in the Bills scheme. That could be, the broad jump, the vertical, the stuff we're going to talk about tonight. You can sort all of that on this website. So that's, kind of cool when it comes to that. So let's start with the defensive side of the ball, and it's going to be heavy defense again, kind of like we had in our first free agent episode, because again, we believe that's where most of the work needs to be done. And so I want to start off with defensive tackles, man. Let's start off with Darius Alexander, the defensive tackle from Toledo. I'd like to get your thoughts on this player. He had a really good combine. Most of his measurables, when we're talking broad jump, when we're talking vertical, when we're talking his arm length and weight and stuff, he ticked a lot of those boxes when we're talking Bills archetypes.
Yeah, he had the 10th largest arm length for defensive tackles who were measured and participated in the combine this year. Similar kind of area from a wingspan perspective as well. So ticking that piece that they like. He's a guy who every time I think of him, he lit up the Senior Bowl and did really well. And every time I hear his name, I just think of, he would have been a guy we probably would have fallen in love with had we gone this year. But the explosiveness you see inside, the ability to disrupt, I feel like he plays a bit high at times, which is something that worries me a little bit, especially from a run defense standpoint. And then you pair that with just how he's built. I would like him to have, if this makes sense for folks, a little more kind of heaviness to his lower body, a little more like sand to his game, but he still is able to use his length to stack and shed and control blockers with that ability against the run. But so much of his game is that explosion, that juice, the ability to just pile drive guys on the interior and drive them back into the quarterback. Good hand usage as well. You know, for being as physical and explosive as he is, he's got some technicality to him. He's a guy, again, popped at the Senior Bowl, had a good combine from a measurement and performance standpoint. And then you watch some of this tape and he's a dude that kind of jumps off the page.
Yeah, I mean, he looks so much bigger. He looks the part, right? He looks the part, and especially in a lot of these clips. Now, he's not the most explosive guy, but you see him just move guys off their spot, off their sets. You know, he's got those big long arms to put his hands up in the passing lanes. Look at some of these plays, man. It's pretty remarkable. So here he is, right over the guard, and you see him just get ricocheted by the feed block, and then just come right back. And guess who's right there in the hole? Running back's like, oh, where did you come from? So very good work by him in the hole there.
Yeah, I like that athleticism paired with that size, the ability. Even that's a good example too, right? You're kind of getting knocked out and displaced a little bit, but the ability to have that focus, still see what's going on, and then almost kind of stop on a dime a little bit, put your foot in the ground and kind of retrace a little bit and get back in the hole. That's a nice piece to see.
Yeah, so explosive interior force, long arms, quick hands. He's got a really nice swim or arm over move, bench press power. You'll see some of these clips where he just moves guys against their will, and he disrupts the passing game, you know, by getting his hands up in those passing lanes. He just I think he would fit in the Bills scheme as a nose tackle. There's that arm over move and swim right there. You know, you see the power on contact. Look at the pads of the offensive lineman as he's kick sliding to his right. The power by Alexander, and then there's that tight, efficient arm over, and you see him pressure the quarterback there, and as the quarterback gets rid of it. So I think he'd be a really good fit in the Bill scheme. He's got some decent lateral quickness and agility, which obviously we know the Bills really covet because of the run stunts that they run when they're trying to stop the run. But also there are times where they're going to spike their D tackles and D ends and bring a safety off the edge or a linebacker off the edge. And that's something that you got to have good agility from your nose tackle and D tackles to slant across the face of the offensive lineman.
I'm glad that you mentioned, you know, seeing him as a fit as a nose tackle, because that kind of sets us up to have this conversation as we talk about defensive tackles here. As we've talked about this offseason, as we talked about within the free agency aspect, we get so many people who, and I am one of them, I would like a plugger in the middle, but that plugger is very relative to how the Bills like their interior players to play. Even if you are more of that one tech or that nose tackle or the quote unquote plugger for them, you still need to have some semblance of upfield ability, some sort of ability to rush the quarterback, get upfield, one gap penetrate. They are not looking for Ted Washington. As much as you might want that to be like, man, it'd be great for them just to plug a huge dude in the middle of the defense who won't get moved around. That's fine. That's typically not how they operate from an archetype standpoint. So when you look at somebody like Darius Alexander, I could see someone being like, nose tackle, he's only like 305 pounds. That's the type of nose tackle they look for. Like their heavy plugger is like 305 to 315 maybe. Daquan was around like 315, 320 when he came through, I believe.
When he came through, but he played at 307, 310.
Exactly.
Harrison Phillips was 310. Like, they're not big nose tackles.
No. And even Austin Johnson, a guy that we liked the past couple of years, he slimmed down when he came and was almost in like he was a one tech, but was also doing some moonlighting as a 3 and was built more like a 3. This is the type of guy they look for in terms of like a plugger. It's just not the traditional definition that most fans are defining plugger by.
Right. He had 4 sacks, 25 hurries last year, 3 batted passes.
Oh, I love
He's a guy I have a second round grade on, but given his traits and, you know, the time he's played several years at Toledo. He's a guy I could see creeping up to the bottom of the first round. So I have a second round grade on him. I think he's a solid second rounder. I think he'd be a good fit for the Bills and probably play pretty early in their scheme. But again, it wouldn't surprise me, especially because how good of an offseason he's had leading into the draft. that he could sneak into the bottom of round 1. But either way, second round grade for me for Darius Alexander.
I second that notion. He's got a 2 for me. And I am in lockstep with you. These type of dudes who really do well and shine at the Senior Bowl and then follow that up with a good combine tend to kind of creep in a little bit. I could see him creeping into the first. If he's not, I don't want to say this so early now. I don't think he's going to be there at the end of the second when the Bills are picking. Like, I really think the sweet spot for him is like 25 to 40, like somewhere in that range. I think he goes from like a pick perspective just because of the traits, the flashes you see, the body type, how he's built, what he offers you versus the pass versus the run. And then even some like alignment possibilities. I think depending on what defense you run, he can be popped out in a variety of alignments on the front, which is also kind of intriguing to a lot of teams.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the next guy. This is a guy I really like.
Same, yeah.
This is something we talked about too when we did the defensive side of stuff for the Bills for free agency. A guy to keep an eye on, TJ Sanders from South Carolina. He fits because he's explosive, he's disruptive, he's got elite lateral quickness. Now, vertically, just coming up the field, not the best, but when we're talking lateral quickness, like we were talking about with some of Alexander, it's elite, and his hand power is very good. He's got some really nice pass rush moves, and he can play several positions, which we know that versatility is incredibly important in the Bills scheme. Nose tackle, 3 tech. They put him at 5 tech when they're in those 5-man surfaces. Those run stunts are something that South Carolina did a bunch of, primarily between the D tackles, where they would kind of spike. One would spike, one would loop. And then there TJ Sanders is right in the gap where the running back is supposed to enter the line of scrimmage. Now, he needs some work when you talked about Alexander with the pad level. His pad level is a little high at times, slow to read, down or back blocks, which can get him washed down at times. And that kind of just takes away from the impact he makes. But more times than not, man, he's very, very good at stacking and shedding as a defensive lineman for South Carolina.
Man, I thought he played with a lot of violence and pop, which really could be said for the entirety of that line. Even, Sanders there, number 90. You've got Kennard, number 5, who's also coming out in this class. And then you had freshman Dylan Stewart, who is number 6 there. Just dudes who they all hunt on that front. And you're seeing these reps. This is a really good one too. That lateral step, that explosion, that's a big thing for me, his ability to jump gaps. And when he does it, he stays low. He's not jumping and getting up high. This is a good one too. He gets low. He jumps that gap, stays low, and then he's able to dip and rip through a little bit and power through. I just like his movement up front, the quickness, the burst, the leverage, the lateral agility and explosion. I'm just going off of my eval notes here. Good motor. He'll retrace and chase down QBs on draws and scrambles. If you're running screens, he's going after guys. He'll battle versus double teams. He can limit displacement a bit with leverage. And just because of how tenacious and tough that he plays, I like your piece from a negative standpoint in terms of the block recognition piece and kind of getting washed out from time to time with those blocks and kind of seeing it and keying it quickly enough. But you look at somebody who can get upfield, who's got juice, who's got some explosion, who's got some pop, who's got some violence, who's got that motor that you look for. Oh, love the hand swipe. The hand swiping and hand usage overall is something that I think is a real strength in his game. I think he would be a really great fit for the Bills just because of his skill set and how he operates and how they tend to like their guys to play on the inside.
Yeah, he was 6'4", 297 pounds. So again, maybe not purely a nose tackle, but can rotate there and play there. He played a bunch there in South Carolina.
And it's also not a bad thing too if you have like a high level 3 tech who's the rotator with Ed Oliver, like it. If you told, again, he's not Ed Oliver, but if you told me like, oh, you can have 2 Ed Olivers and then you can rotate them, well, that seems pretty fun.
Yeah, 33 1/8 inch arms, 9 for broad jump, 31.5 inch vertical. He hit all the marks when it comes to the Bills. When we're talking defensive tackles, the Bills really pay attention to, surprise, broad jump and vertical explosiveness. They don't care too much about the weight, the height thing, but explosiveness is really crucial to the Bills scheme. We always talk about it. It's up the field, penetrating style. That's why TJ Sanders is a great fit for the Bills scheme. He has that explosiveness to get up the field, and he has some power, and you can see him just do a lot of the dirty work. It's not, he doesn't win cleanly and pretty. He wins ugly a lot of times. And it's things like this. You see him split this protection here and then go and get the quarterback. He's a player. I think he's a perfect fit. He offers a little bit in the run game from the stack and shed ability, but also some of that explosiveness, to short area explosiveness as a pass rusher. And he's got some really nice hand usage and moves when we're talking rushing the passer.
Yeah, his technique mixed with the violence and tenacity he brings inside is really just what attracts me to him. And you said it, like when he wins, he's got some reps where, ooh, like that was a really great swiper. He's so quick off the ball and he gets through. But a lot of times it's messy, it's ugly, but it's violent. And I like that on the interior. I want more guys with more sandpaper, more grit to them. He had one rep. It was a run defense rep, and I forget who it was. Gets right into the guard, and he's reading the running back's track. And just in the blink of an eye, the violence and the snap with which he just chucks this guard and envelops the running back, I was like, I'm sold. Like, I'm right there. It felt like he was angry about being blocked or like angry that they were running. And obviously, I don't know if he was or not, but that level of violence, that snap, that juice, all in all facets, run, pass, motor, what he's able to do. I really like that into his game. And so, yeah, I'm in lockstep with you on there. I would welcome him in Buffalo.
Yeah, and I also think he is a second rounder. Yep. Not as high as Alexander, but I do think he's a solid second rounder. And it's funny, I was posting some clips on X yesterday on Sanders and how much I liked him, and I thought he was a fit for the Bills. And our guy Jordan Reed from ESPN, he messaged me. He goes, "Man, good minds think alike," and he sent me his most recent mock with Sanders going to the Bills in the second round. So he agrees with us when it comes to Sanders. Again, I think he's a perfect fit and someone that I would like to see in the Bills scheme, honestly, much like this next guy we're going to talk about, a guy he's also ascending when we're talking this offseason and everything that he's done throughout this draft process so far. That's defensive tackle Josh Farmer from Florida State. Man, I want to hear your thoughts on this big guy from Florida State. Some rumblings with him where he didn't quite hit the ceiling that they thought he would, but when I turn on his tape, yes, there was some inconsistencies. He just popped from a violent standpoint, from a hustle standpoint, but again, it was in those short spurts when we're talking the overall player.
So this is super funny. I watched him. I forget against Clemson and Notre Dame, I believe it was, and I wasn't really a fan. And then I saw that you had him tabbed as a dude that you liked. And I was like, all right, I got to go back. I have to watch more games. There has to be something that I'm missing here somewhere. And there was. Like, I started to see, first I saw him as more of just kind of like a bulky dude. I like the ability to kind of have strength and be able to hold his ground and not get moved. He's a dude that when you watch him, he looks heavy, like in his lower body. Like, you are not moving him. And then, I would say the first game that I went to was Georgia Tech after I went to those first two. And you just start to see that some violence. You start to see some of that explosion, that push-pull that he has, the ability to kind of just go through dudes and affect the pocket and disrupt, and what he can do against the pass and the run, how he can win early at times, flash that ability to kind of put some moves together. And again, big thing for me, when getting double teamed, he's not getting displaced. That's a big one for me. Just don't get moved. I would like somebody on the interior who will not get moved. But then, yeah, look how he's operating against this double team here. He's already chucking one dude to the ground.
One guy.
Yeah, threw one guy to the ground. Then he's sitting there. This started to show up more, and I found that very encouraging because the first two games, I was like, oh man, I'm like, and I had a couple people. You weren't the only one. A couple people who were like, man, have you watched Farmer? Like, he's really flashing. And I'm like, all right, what games am I not watching? Because I'm not seeing it. And I started to watch more tape, get myself more of a sample size, started to see how he moved. And I really became more of a fan because you started to see more of that violence and pop to his game the more you watched.
Yeah, he's 6'3", 305 pounds, 35-inch arms, 9'4" broad, 29-inch vert, 26 bench press reps. So he hits,
which is crazy for that arm length. Like, having that long of arms and be able to crank out almost 30 reps on the bench, you're strong as hell. Like, that's wild. And that's the kind of strength you see on tape.
Yeah, and I say he has an explosive first stage. So his initial plan, whatever it is very explosive. It's very good, ideal size, great length, and all that good stuff. But he does a good job of turning speed to power. But I just love these type of reps right here as he's over the right guard. Just watch him with that ability to, again, discard the combination block, throw that guy, but still track the ball. And as a running back bounces and jump cuts outside, he's there to help make the tackle. his game against Duke here
Mhm.
was phenomenal. Here's a nose tackle rep where he just sheds, destroys that block, and goes and makes the tackle. Like, that is where you want to see more consistency with this. But this is what's in his toolbox. I mean, look at how he jacks up the guard and how those pads of that guard elevate, and then he just push, pull, get out of my way. I'm going to get the ball. That's what the Bills need. We're talking up the middle. Again, this guy, he's not that plugger as everyone wants. He's not 320 pounds. He's not 330. But when you play with heavy hands like that, ability to track the ball and ability to destroy blocks like that, it doesn't matter how much you weigh.
That's a fair point. And even just if you talk about the overall weight, that's one thing. But the way the weight is proportioned, again, he's the type of dude that I feel like he's got some, not to be like, he's got some heaviness like in his ass, and like he's just a load to move, whether it's like him doing it purposely and kind of almost like sinking or dropping his weight a little bit. He's just a dude who doesn't get moved a bunch, but he's not immobile. And some dude that's like, okay, well, he's a rock and he's getting planted. You can see some of that movement ability. Even that right there, like he's got that double team and he's getting wrenched back a little bit. But for him limiting and mitigating the displacement, and this isn't a double team that they're coming off of. Like, it's literally a guard and a tackle who are just trying to drive him off the ball, and he gets knocked back what? Let's see. There's one. He gets knocked back a yard. He gets knocked back 1 yard with two huge guys who are both under him trying to wrench him back. I will take somebody who can limit displacement and then has enough pop like that push-pull in terms of the run or in terms of the pass to be able to discard or shed on the interior and make something happen. That's his go-to. I like it, and it pairs well with that immovability that he has at times where he can just get into guys, watch, track, shed, and attack.
Yeah, as a pass rusher, I do think what he needs to work on is that second stage. Again, that the counters, the transitions, which is expected, right, for a guy like that. And then shedding combo blocks to finish the rushes when it comes to rushing the passer, not some of the combo blocks when you saw him defending the run. He's actually decent at that, at least more consistent at that. But when he's trying to, again, at the nose tackle position or even the three tech at times, you got to be able to split those double teams and pass protection and have plans on how to finish versus those type of protections. And I think he just needs to work on that, which again is expected for a guy like him. I think he's another really good fit, and I think he was on Kay Adams' show.
Yeah,
recently.
he said he was like, I love the Bills.
He is apparently a Bills fan now and a Chiefs fan for that matter. But
I didn't see that. Boo.
But I do have him more of like a late third, early fourth round guy. And I think he's someone that it's going to take some time to develop, but pairing him in there with Oliver, with Daquan Jones, or whoever else they bring in, I think he'd be a really good player to develop, especially when we're talking some of the pieces they added to the personnel and things that we're expecting them to tweak just a little bit for the defense.
Yeah, sorry, I have an early day 3 grade on him. So kind of similar in that boat with you. For me, it really stems from the questions around being able to transition moves together as a pass rusher, not getting kind of stood up in place at times and seeing what kind of effectiveness he can have. But again, with his ability against the run, that's somebody that I would look for them to target depending on how I shouldn't say the first 3 rounds because they don't have a 3rd round pick right now. Depending on how the first 3 picks play out on day 1 and 2, if you're still looking for some reinforcement on that interior on day 3 and he's there in that spot, that's somebody that I'd look for them to gravitate towards, potentially tap into a little bit on the interior there. Also on the defensive line, just on the exterior of it, are the next group of prospects we wanted to talk about. We're going to lead off with someone whose name that I have practiced to make sure that I'm getting it right. Boston College's Donovan Ezeiruaku, edge number 6. When you talk about dip, when you talk about bend, when you talk about pass rush plan, when you talk about length and frame, this is a guy who has it in a lot of spades. I love your comp for him on this graphic. Somebody who just flashes in a multitude of ways when you turn on the tape.
Yeah. All right. So his vitals is 6'2.5", 248 pounds, 34-inch arms. That I wasn't quite expecting. 35.5-inch vert, 9'11 broad, 4.193 cone, which was the best at the end. And that you do see on film to go along with 22 bench reps. So when I first watched him, I was kind of underwhelmed when it came to that first step quickness I was expecting for a guy that was highly talked about.
Mm.
And so I didn't really see all of that. I felt like, unlike Dante Fowler, who I have as a comp, Fowler was like has always been one of the, snap to pressure guys, like really quickly creating pressure. I didn't see that with Donovan, but what Donovan does a little different is that he kind of paces it like a receiver. Like he waits for that tackle to show his set, and then he works quickly around that guy. So that's why I said he's a calculated pass rusher, lean frame, long arms, moves like Dante Fowler. Again, he has that Mayweather, like avoiding the punches, playing type of defensive pass rush plan and precision. Great job of slipping blocks. They do a lot of cool things against the run where he can loop. He can, again, dart in and out of blocking. He does a great job, if we're talking pass rusher, as with his cross chop and his hand usage. He's very good at that. And again, it's just his agility. His agility is cat-like quick. And you saw it in the testing at the combine, and you see it as soon as you turn on that film.
Yeah, the quickness, the agility, the dip, the bend. And it's funny too, you mentioned it, like he's not somebody who has this crazy get off. And as soon as the snap happens, you're like, oh, like watch him explode. But it's just, like you said, it's calculated and it's precise. Same thing with his hand usage. Like very rarely is he got a hand that's misplaced or it's ineffective. You have it up there on the graphic, the way he times his cross chops perfectly. It's not only the timing, it's the precision. Like the cross chop, his hand is right on your wrist, and it's right as that tackle's bringing that wrist up and he's bringing it down. He doesn't even have to pair it with a club because it's so clean, and then he dips and bends around that corner. For me, one of the big things that I start here was the effortless fluidity that he has, his ability to just, whether he's moving side to side, whether he's getting upfield and dipping, it just seems like his body is able to flow and bend in whatever direction that he needs to. And in addition to that good dip and bend, good core strength for somebody who really likes to run that arc. You'll see it with guys that get to run that arc, but if a tackle gets hands on them, they can kind of push them upfield and get it around. He can do two things. One, he can ghost the absolute hell out of a tackle and dip underneath those hands and flatten the QB. Or even if you're still able to get hands on him, he can still power through whatever position his body is in. He's able to still power through and stay flat and get to the quarterback. So he can play through hands. He can play through a shoulder or play through an arm. And I really like that ability to have that athleticism and bend to get around clean, or that strength and that power to still be able to dip and get through like a shoulder or an arm or hands and not get pushed and kind of run around that a little bit. And when you pair that with being able to regularly chop wrists and disengage versus blockers, I like that he beats tight ends regularly. If you're trying to block him with the tight end in the pass or the run, he's swimming, he's stacking and shedding quickly. It's very effortless for him against guys that aren't offensive linemen. If you're a tackle or if you're trying to crack him, as a wide receiver in a condensed formation, he's beating that and then he's making plays after it. A ton of productivity this past year at Boston College with what he did, including a crazy productive game against Pitt where he had 14 pressures. But on the year, 60 pressures overall, and then 42 stops to go with it. This is a guy who plays the pass, he plays the run, he gives effort against both. He's someone who has a lot of promise and polish to his game already, physically, but also from a technical standpoint.
Right. And that leads me to things that, he needs to do better. And like I said, on the film, I didn't see like first step explosiveness or snap anticipation. But I also didn't see his effort kind of sucked on some run plays that were away from him. I saw several loafs and loafs are taking a play off a game like for that play. I don't like that. Obviously, it's almost like he is the defensive version of a wide receiver in an Art Briles scheme where, hey, if you're not getting the ball, you don't have to run a route. As a receiver, I feel like if he's not rushing the passer and the run's not coming at him, he's not chasing plays down, which is a big no-no. I don't think the staff will like that. And so you don't get to see him really chase down plays or see him open it up to chase down plays with that speed. But overall, I thought, we've the last couple of years have really touted Dante Fowler in the Bills scheme. And so I think he would be a good fit in the Bills scheme. And I have a day one grade on him. I think, the testing didn't really change too much for me. But I do have a first round grade on him towards the back end of the first round for Donovan Ezeiruaku. Is that how you say it?
I didn't want you to ask me
to.
again because I nailed it the first time. As Ezeiruaku.
Ezeiruaku.
I was like,
sorry,
oh,
buddy. I'm sorry if we
no,
butchered your name.
it's okay. I think we got it both times. I think we're okay. I think we're all right. Yeah, I'm in. I had a late first, early 2 on him just because of the lack of that burst or initial speed. I'm interested because he didn't run the 40, and so we didn't get a 40 and we didn't get a 10-yard on him.
Mhm.
I'm interested to see what those times look like. And again, some of that, not that you shouldn't trust times, but pro day times are less trusted than combine times. And at this point, guys game these up. Like they're literally training for the 40 and training for all these, metrics, different drills. So it is different a little bit, but I would like to see what his 10-yard and his 40 is just to kind of put some numbers and data to what we're seeing on that tape. And then, some of the run defense stuff, although I do think the effort and the ability is there. I'd like to see it just be more consistent. So but I'm going to send with both late first, early 2. I think he's somebody that goes, well, honestly, I could see somebody taking a flyer on him once we get to the 20s, but another guy who I think is probably 25 to 35, somewhere in that range, or if he's the first pick, if he's the last pick on round 1 or the first pick to start round 2, he strikes me as that type of dude, given the position and given how he plays that spot. All right. Next up on the edge grouping.
Who are we talking about next?
We're talking about Ole Miss edge defender Princely Umanmielen. Look at me pronounce the name.
Skilled it.
Right? That's the pick. I didn't watch any tape on him. I just watched interviews and made sure to pronounce his name. No, but another dude who really, at this point, between him and Nolan and Amos, I've watched so much Ole Miss tape. I never thought I've watched like 9 or 10 different games in some form or fashion for each of them. Like some guys, I'm like, okay, I can watch them both in this game. Others, I'm loading up different ones. But Princely Umanmielen, another spot that we're talking about here, defensive line, again on the exterior, somebody who has some athleticism, but a little bit different versus Donovan Ezeiruaku on this one, because he does flash that explosion on that first step and a really good get off that he can just beat some dudes clean around the corner with.
Now, I will say this guy versus the last guy, it's a little different when we're talking archetypes. All right. So this would be, hey, the Bills have invested in Von Miller, kind of tweaking their archetype a little bit, going for a little bend, a little athleticism. Even last year they did it as well. And so this guy is 6'4", 244 pounds, 33 7/8 inch arms. So the arm length is it's locked in, but he's a little on the lighter side for the Bills.
So just to kind of put that in perspective, he's 2 inches taller than Ezeiruaku, but he weighs 4 pounds less.
Yes. And his 10-yard split was fantastic at 1.62, 38-inch vert, obviously a very explosive player, 10.6 broad. And so he's a little different when we're talking, the look of him and the size of him. And so when I watched his film, man, I had to, so much of his film, I don't have it here on the screen, but so much of his film, you have to watch from the All-22 so you can see that snap anticipation, that first step explosiveness. And in this game against Georgia, I kept coming back to it because not only did he show that explosiveness, that elite athleticism, that quick first step and long stride, but you also got to see him stack moves together. And we're not just talking about against one tackle. They had 2 different tackles in there over the course of this game. So he showed some really nice pass rush plans and then counters and transitions. So I want to take a look at these real quick. So off the right side of the screen here, you're going to see him initial speed and rip. So up the field, dips under the hands of the left tackle, and then bend and flattens the quarterback for the sack.
He loves that move.
He does. That's that move. And his bread and butter is up the field and dipping under the hands. He's good at beating the hands with his speed and explosiveness. So later in the game, you're going to see speed to power here. The tackle comes out, he makes a set, and he goes right to power, rushes, through the tackle to the quarterback on that play later in the game. He's a speed, fake, cross chop inside. Again, layers to his pass rushes, man. Here it is again. He's going up the field. He's showing that cross chop right there. And as soon as that left tackle shows his hands, you see the spin move, you see the ice pick, you see him flatten to the quarterback, hit the quarterback, the ball sails a little bit, and it gets intercepted by the Ole Miss defender on the backside. So now he again is going against the left tackle. And this time he kind of slow plays it, a little hezzy rush. And then this time you see him cross chop as soon as that tackle throws his hands. Dude, his ability to time the hands of the tackles or offensive linemen is uncanny. And you see it here, and you see it several times in this game against Georgia.
Yeah, that Georgia one, this really getting to see like all three aspects of it, like the ability to kind of win inside, the ability to go through somebody, the ability to go around them, and then being able to stack those moves together, chain things, but also that plan of knowing like, okay, this is how I was beating so-and-so earlier. Let me flash that and pop something else. And I really like how everything can really just get based off of that speed dip and rip from him. Like we said, like that's his go-to. You'll see him do that in almost every single game. And he pairs that with a good get off. You're seeing it there too. Like, so not only is it that speed, and that dip and rip, but watch him just go on the snap. As soon as he's out. Yeah. And that tackle is trying to meet him there, but 71's really got to get on his hump because Princely's already threatening him. I'm going with Princely because I don't want to say the last name
like that.
wrong.
Yeah, that's smart
and
play.
It's a unique enough first name that we'll know who we're talking about. As long as the name is like, oh yeah, James. It's like, James who? I don't want to do that. Yeah, just that ability to turn the corner because of that get off and that speed. But then how he's built, being able to power through some hands and power through some shots there. But then again, it's stacking it. Like I like guys, and I know, you feel similarly, guys who, you can go through somebody, you can go around them, or you can go inside of them. He's not just this one-trick pony. He flashes things in a multitude of layers, and I really like that, aside from just having that initial juice, like having that semblance of plan and having that physical ability to go along with the mental side of it and just how smooth he's able to do it and how he moves. He's somebody obviously that is very intriguing, and a defense full of intriguing guys at Ole Miss.
Right. And so some of the things he needs to work on, he's got that lean frame. So I think initially he's not going to be an every down type defensive end or starter. He's going to be a situational, rotational guy. He's got to build up that mass, got to build that strength so that he can engage blockers in the run game and hold the point of attack because he gets bounced around a little bit. So he needs refinement in that area. But he's a guy that if the Bills were to sign him or bring him on and draft him, he is a situational guy that I think – depending on how Von Miller pans out, right? He could be that situational pass rusher on third down. You have Epinesa as that early down run player. That's kind of the role he took last year. We'll see if that changes. But Princely would be that third down, obvious pass rush situations type of guy. And when he comes in, we talked about in the free agent podcast a couple weeks ago on the defensive side, we talked about converting, pressures to sacks. I think he's a guy that can make an impact in that area on obvious passing downs.
Yeah, and also somebody who has, the athleticism to his game is not just limited on the defensive line. They would drop him into coverage from time to time at Ole Miss. So again, it's not his forte. This isn't where you want him living, but someone who can potentially operate in that world if you get more Sims and you get more creepers like we are hopefully going to get, like we continue to clamor for on this show. So somebody who, again, that just adds to the benefit of that situational aspect. If he is more of a third down situational rusher, now it's like, okay, maybe he's dropping into coverage 7 or 8% of the time. It's just an extra little wrinkle. And then you can have that on top of the ability to hunt, a really nice, intriguing package for Princely Umanmielen.
Skilled it, man. Great job with that pronunciation.
Thank you.
I have a late day 2 grade on him, round 3-ish. And again, it wouldn't surprise me back end of the second round. I have him right around the 3rd round for him. Again, situational guy to start, but could make a major impact in the passing game.
Yeah, I have a 3 on him. To your point, though, I mean, pass rushers get valued and what he offers. Maybe he could creep into the 2, but just because of the frame questions and then some of the run defense pieces and how, like you said, you said a key thing in my notes, just how he gets bounced around a bit against the run. That's why I have him as more of a 3, but, could be somebody who gets propped up on boards based on what he can do against the pass. This next one, watch it like he changed his name and it's like it's not just Landon Jackson, it's something like obscure because I'm like, oh, this is so easy. So yeah, not a hard name to pronounce like our previous 2. Landon Jackson, edge rusher from Arkansas, someone who, man, the traits that he has and some of the tape, I don't even speak for myself here. Like I watched several, and again, broadcast can be a lie and is a lie.
Sure.
But I remember watching a couple games of Arkansas during the year and kept hearing about him. And I watched the games and I was like, man, I'm just not a fan. And also part of it is and you have it up here in the work to do sec. I personally, and this probably isn't great to operate with, I'm just not a fan of dudes who are higher cut at any position. Like it worries me,
Agreed.
especially at a spot where I want change of direction and transition and fluidity ability. Those guys, it's usually harder for those guys to do that. And so between that and in-season stuff, I wasn't a huge fan. The more I watched his tape, though, I liked it. Like the violence that he has to his game, the tenacity, the long arm that he plays with, how he's kind of built from a schematic standpoint and within his skill set, despite being physically high cut. I thought there were some really intriguing pieces to his game the more I watched the tape.
I mean, this guy, I know he's high cut. I mean, 6'6", 6'7". When you get up into that height, it does become an issue. You know, you're talking pad level and center of gravity. But I will say, like, we know the Bills like their DNs big because of the light boxes and a lot of too high shells they show. So when it comes to height, he's taller than the Bills' averages and archetypes. I even went back and looked at Ryan Nielsen's time in New Orleans in 2017 to 2022 to see like what their numbers look like. And he's taller than those numbers as well. Now he was 6'6", 264, 33 1/4 inch arms, 165, 10-yard split, 40.5 vertical, 10.9 broad jump. He killed it. He killed the testing. I mean, when you're talking all the measurables and data and stuff like that, when it comes to the Bills or even the Saints for that matter, he exceeded a lot of those numbers. And so I do think that, you know, what he brings was surprising because as for a guy that's that tall, he was very fluid. And I said that he exhibits a seamless coordination between his feet and his hands. They're in unison. It's very coordinated. It's very basketball-like, right? Having that hand-eye coordination. Really nice cross chop, hezzy rush moves. And the thing that threw me off this week with the Jackson was the comparison to Max Crosby, which really hits home with me because that was one of my guys. Greg Cosell put it out there that he reminded him of Max Crosby. And you know, I hate using comps. And so I'm very specific when I use them. And comparing Jackson to Crosby really got to me a little bit because Crosby was a lot more flexible and again, not the high cut type player. And I understand he's trying to describe the play type. And what I think he was trying to portray or convey was how fluid and his movements were very like water, right? Like, you know, the Bruce Lee saying, right? And you see him in perpetual motion. And when he gets, you know, bounced around by a tackle, he just redirects that energy and you know, goes in a different direction. He doesn't just take that quickest line. He'll go ahead and redirect his energy. And so I think that's what Greg Cosell was saying and trying to convey to fans. And you see it when you turn on his film. And the most important thing that he does as a pass rusher is beat the hands. If you beat the hands, you beat the man. And he knows how to do that. And Anthony, what's interesting about that is sometimes he's in a 3-tech, sometimes he's in a 4-eye.
Yep.
You know, sometimes he's head up over a tackle. And so with a guy that, while he tested amazing and elite, you don't always see that first step explosiveness and quickness. And so based on the scheme he played in and alignments he was put in, he had to figure out ways over the last couple of years to win without being a wide 9 technique like you saw Princely doing. And so his ability to have that repertoire of how to beat the hands, to beat the man is a lot more diverse than, say, Princely like you saw in those last cut-ups.
Absolutely. And that's such a great tie-in. You know, you mentioned his vert time and his broad jump time. He had the highest vert of any edge at the combine this year. He had the second highest broad jump of any edge this year. And the first game that I watched for him was against Tennessee. And the majority of that game, he's in a 4-eye or he's straight up in a 4 and playing in their 3 down front. They're running like tight front stuff. But you watch him kind of come off the ball. And I liked it because it showed me what he could do as a run defender from a gap integrity standpoint and how he could use those long arms to not just rush the passer, but actually, you know, violently jack up and shock tackles and hold his gap, read a running back's track and affect the run game. But then you see the juice and what he offers as a pass rusher. And so many of these, you see that hand usage, the hand fighting, and almost similar to kind of, the relationship of a wide receiver and a DB is very similar from a hand fighting perspective and from a feet perspective as well, kind of for offensive line and defensive line. And you just see that hand fighting ability from him to just, like you said, beat the hands, beat the man. He's clearing them. It's clean. But he's also got some violence and tenacity to him. He can knock you back into the quarterback. He's got some pocket compression. He's got that long arm ability that he can use, again, to stun guys and back them up into the quarterback's lap. And he moves, like you said, that fluidity, that athleticism.
This
He
play
moved.
right here.
Yes, good call. That just watch him for a dude who's high cut. And I do think it that in the lower body build will get him at times. But to transition from going from that outside move to lean and come back inside, that flexibility and that ability to stop, start, get inside, like it's an interesting part of his game for someone that is high cut, but it's also, again, it's still something that I'm going to worry about a little bit with just how he transitions, changes direction, all that kind of stuff. But it didn't limit him as much as I thought it was going to based off of, I guess, my preconceived notions before I watched the tape.
So I watched a bunch of tape from this year, but then yesterday I was like, you know what? After going back and forth with Steve Mathis about, where he would fall, and I don't think he's a bottom of the first round guy, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills were interested, giving his archetype, his size, what the Bills typically like, and his potential on day 2. And so I went back to last year's footage where he had 4 sacks against Alabama. So let's look at these. You see he's probably just like a 7 technique, 2-point stance. See him rush up the field, and then right there again, beat the hands. Look at the left hand. Watch how it chops that cross chop right there. And then he uses the right hand to seal off that move and then bend and flatten to the quarterback to bring down the quarterback for the sack. Now here's same game, same matchup versus the left tackle up the field, and that left tackle oversets, expecting the outside move. You see him transition, right, Anthony? You see him transition, shuckle that guy by, and then go get the quarterback. And that's sack number 2. So now look at this. Now you have a tighter alignment. He's basically in like a 5 tech just outside the tackle. And you see him cross chop from a tight alignment, which, Anthony, talk about that. Being able to win from tighter alignments is a necessity in the Bills scheme. Again, given how they ask their bigger defensive ends to not only, rush the passer from tight alignment, but stop the run.
Yeah. And this is a much harder thing, so not only is it, applicable to the Bills, but that's a harder thing to do, to be able to win from that tighter alignment. You're not necessarily operating in all that space when you operate from a wider alignment, and you're kind of putting a tackle or an offensive lineman on an island, and the ability to get to his move right out of the gate in that regard from that tighter alignment, and to be able to get to that cross chop similarly as if he was rushing from a wide alignment and in that true one-on-one in space, that takes some juice, that takes some precision. That's a really nice aspect to see in his game.
Yeah. Like I said, at times, his alignment and how they used him in 4 eyes and 3 technique looks and odd front looks, it hindered him as a player when it came to stopping the run. But it also, again, over the years, has really forced him to perfect how to win and beat the hands of the offensive lineman, which you're seeing here him do in multitude of ways. But what you also saw, like you talked about, he's got some of that, obviously has the length and the power. They bumped him inside last year. This is 2023. You see Jane Daniels at quarterback. They bumped him inside against guards at times, and you saw him just drive that guard right into the face of Daniels. And he had some really nice reps against Campbell in that game as well. And you see right there, cross chop, but Campbell's feet made up for it, kind of rode him wide of the spot. So I don't think he's a day 1 guy, but given his measurables and the pass rush arsenal that he has, captain at Arkansas, put in his time, has put up the production, I could see the Bills absolutely falling in love with Landon Jackson of Arkansas.
Yeah, I could see, I have a 2 on him. I could see him creeping up into round 1 at the back end of round 1, just in general. But I also, like you said, I could see it for the Bills. I'm not going to drill down too much on it because of what you said. I agree. I liked his game more than I thought I would. And even, from the inside stuff, which kind of gave me another inkling of, why the Bills could like him, like somebody that you can kick inside, potentially on known pass rushing downs and situations. And he's got some of that size, and he's got some physicality. Like you can run some 2-man games with him being like at a 3 tech or a wide inside alignment and running kind of like a twist with an edge and he can spike and create some problems for an offense. He had one against Tennessee where he's lined up in like a 4-eye, but he's from a defensive tackle standpoint, and him and the edge run a little game. He's the spiker, and he gets face masked like hard. Like they rip his face mask, and he just plays right through it.
Right through it.
And heats up the QB and spears him and drops him to the ground while he is trying to look through his ear hole because his face mask is sideways. And I just think that tenacity and the traits, I could see all that kind of propping him up a bit. I also, again, this is a big assumption and I don't know. I feel like he'll interview well, not just for the Bills, but for a lot of teams. And so, yeah, I could see him creeping up into round 1 and being a guy that the Bills will target based on what they like to look for from a schematic standpoint and from a culture and personality standpoint. Power to all you folks for powering through us with this episode. We're rolling through, but again, this is the time of year where we get, I feel like these episodes go a little longer for us because we get into, or maybe I'll speak for myself here. I feel like these episodes are important because whether it's free agency, whether it's draft talk, this is the peak time of year where everybody loves to highlight scout and talk about it as if they know what's up with a player because they watched a 2-minute highlight or they watched a game one time or they heard Daniel Jeremiah like somebody or something. And so I think these episodes are important for us to show and also speak to a lot of these prospects and players that Bills Mafia have their eye on. And I don't want to say like necessarily we're here to kind of like set the narrative straight, but you know, for us speaking on these guys, it takes a lot to go in to be accurate with these evaluations. And I feel like that's reflected in the length of these episodes.
Yeah, we went super long today, but again, we try to cover a lot of these players from the combine that, you know, would fit into the Bills scheme, that would fit into the Bills typical archetypes, and maybe even some that don't really do that. But if the Bills shift, like we've talked about the last few weeks, maybe you see him become a target for them in the draft. So obviously free agency is first. That's right around the corner. If you're interested in the Bills targets on both sides of the ball in free agency, we covered that in the last 2 episodes. So take a look at that. But if you're full throttle into the draft, you have plenty of content just from this episode. And we honestly couldn't even get to everybody because of the length of that we went when it came to the defensive side of the ball, which we hope that the Bills address in free agency and also in the draft.
Absolutely. And if there is someone draft related you folks want us to dive into or a position group to dive into, we, you know, the off season, even though it's in, you know, draft time and free agency time, we're always looking for, you know, additional things to cover or some fun topics or things that you folks are really clamoring for. So anything and everything, get at us on Twitter. Eric's at the Cover One handle, so at Cover and the number 1. His individual is at Eric J. Turner. I'm on Twitter at pro__ant. If you don't have those socials, but you're here on YouTube, leave us a comment here on YouTube. If you are on Reddit, we post these episodes to Reddit. Cool. Comment on Reddit. Let us know something you want us to cover there. We also have the Cover One Film Room handle on Twitter. It's at Cover One Film Room. So Cover, the number 1, FILMROOM. No underscores, no dashes, no numbers, just at Cover One Film Room. We'll be posting stats and film clips and highlighting pieces from our, you know, Twitter accounts in these episodes that are related to these episodes, free agency wise, draft wise, the advanced metrics to film, all of that stuff for you folks. So again, multiple ways to get at us. If you have questions, thoughts, comments, concerns, want us to cover something, let us know. Thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of the Film Room. We hope to see you next week for free agency film breakdown, where hopefully the Bills do a lot of their moves on Monday so we can watch the tape Monday and Tuesday and not just wait until watch them be silent and then like Wednesday at like 4:30 it's just a flurry, and it just, I'm waiting for that to happen to us, but hopefully they operate in a way that'll help us out.
Yeah, let's hope, man. And again, it's going to be fluid. So if that does happen, there's a possibility that we may have to postpone it so that we can get all of our, you know, research and film and all that together. Because as you can see, this was a 2-hour-long episode. A lot went into this episode when it comes to watching all of these games of film, compiling it, editing it, getting the stats for it. A lot went into this, and props to Joe DeRosa, our producer, for helping out with some of the stats and the pre and post production stuff of the Film Room. But again, thank to you guys for tuning in to this episode, and please hit that like button, leave us a comment. Let us know who you want us to break down, whether it's in free agency or the draft. And again, big thanks to tuning into this in-depth episode of the Combine winners, because it took a lot of work to get this out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is a nice way also to kind of set the stage a little bit for our draft coverage that you'll get here in the film room going forward. And yeah, it takes a lot of time to watch all, because also too, like for these games, we're usually watching anywhere from 4 to 6 games for guys. So it's not like, oh, Matthew Golden, let me watch his best game against Arizona State or whatever, and that's it. We're watching a lot. So imagine however many players we talked about here, you're watching anywhere from 4 to 6 games for each player. So it is a lot of time. So we appreciate the support from you folks. If you're watching on YouTube, drop a like, turn on notifications for the Cover One Film Room playlist. If you're listening on the audio platforms, please rate, review, and subscribe to the Cover One Film Room channel. Get at us on socials. Subscribe to the Cover One channel as a whole on audio or on YouTube. We have you covered pretty much every single day of the week with various levels of Bills content for you folks. Thank you very much for tuning in. We will see you next week for another episode of the Film Room, hopefully on Wednesday, because the Bills did us a favor and announced all their free agent signings on Monday. Also, for those who don't know, Monday starting at noon, that's when you'll start to see all the announcements of signings start to trickle through. Nothing is official until Wednesday starting at 4 o'clock when the new league year starts. But Monday is your big news day. You'll start seeing stuff hitting right at noon in terms of so-and-so has agreed in principle to a deal with yada, 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 but nothing's official until Wednesday at 4. We hope you and your family and friends and loved ones are all doing well and staying safe. Be kind to one another. Take care of one another. We'll see you next week. Godspeed. I'm Anthony Prohaska. That's Eric Turner. This has been the Cover One Film Room, and go Bills.